Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone, and I guess welcome to the new form of communication, the new norm for us, certainly for the short-term period of time with the social distancing rules in place. And Jason and I, we are doing our best to keep apart on this couch. Look, before we start, sorry, there's a little function bar down the bottom there. If you've got something you want to mention throughout the presentation, there's a little chat button. You can type in there. There's also one that says Q&A. So if you've got a question that might pop into your head throughout this presentation, please type it in and we'll get to that at the back end. We are conscious to try and keep this to around the 20-minute mark, but as I said, feel free to throw in a question. The reason behind this really is understandably there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety around the place, not only with the markets, but obviously health, business for a lot of people has changed quite dramatically over the last, seems to be day by day now. From a markets perspective, from the peak to where they are now, or I mean, it's hard to say, it was 37% the other day, it's jumped today, it jumped yesterday, so somewhere between the 37% from peak. But we just want you all to know that have a bit of comfort. The portfolios that we constructed are built to withstand these types of periods, and they've done them before. They're highly diversified, not only across asset classes, but within asset classes as well. For those of you that are in pension phase and drawing down on your investments, we do hold quite a lot of cash and fixed interest, which is where we draw the income through these periods of time. Yeah, and we hold for pretty much all of our clients in drawdown phase, somewhere between 3 and 5 years worth of expected cash flows. So if your expected cash flows going out haven't changed because your circumstances haven't changed, then these are not times to panic. We are funding it in the least volatile section of the market. We're putting a hold on rebalancing at the moment while volatility's around. We let it take care of itself. But the pretty solid message that you're going to get through this presentation, while we're going to touch on a bit of context about what's going on, is what we want most of our clients to do is wash their hands and then sit on them. And even if you're on the outside, on the sidelines waiting with cash, we're saying at the moment, just wait for things to settle down. The world is crazy, and there's no point in buying into crazy. And there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead. So we're going to we've got a few slides to try and put as best as possible the current markets in perspective to what's happened over history, and we've also got obviously some government announcements that came out a couple of days ago. So we'll touch base on a couple of them that we think may be important in regards to you guys. So let's get the ball rolling, Jace. Okay, you kick her off. So we thought we would start with a slide that comes from a colleague of ours, Carl Richards, in the United States, who writes in the Wall Street Journal. He's referred to as the sketch guy, as a financial planner. But this is an article he wrote, an image that he based his article around from many, many years ago, which talks about the emotions and cycles of markets. And obviously at the moment we're in, today we might be in a greed stage given what's happened in the last 2 days, but essentially for the last month or 6 weeks we've been in a real fear driving the markets, but the markets are cyclical. And what we want to talk to clients about, and the way that we manage money for you, is to change if your circumstances have drastically changed. But if they haven't, we ride through these cycles, because what we want to avoid clients doing is buying high, selling low, and destroying capital that can't be got back. And we certainly don't want our clients repeating this cycle until broke. And unfortunately, when the emotions are taking on and everything is negative, people who aren't getting advice, anecdotally, we've always thought that they would do potentially the wrong thing. And interestingly, there was an article released in our financial press today from the head of advice and retirement at Sun Super, Anne Fuchs, and the headline is "Sun Super sees an overwhelming flow of unadvised members flocking to cash," because they know which of their members have an advisor attached to them in Sun Super, and their phone lines have gone into meltdown in the last couple of days. It's been very sad, she says, to watch a projection of members selling down in response to market falls and crystallising losses. They are switching to cash and then calling the call centre for validation, and of course the call centres can't provide advice on markets. There has been some movement with their advised clients as well, but nowhere near the significance of what's going on, and that's really the message that we want to run through and show you that the best thing you can do at the moment is not panic. So the first couple of slides we've got there are basically a couple of pretty significant wars of recent times. We'll start with World War II. From the peak, at the start, the market's dropped 41%, and we've used the S&P 500 index here for our examples, which is international index.
Big, broad American index. It's the big companies in America, so there's no rats and mice in this, and it's just to show
the Aussie market pretty much follows suit. Look, pretty scary times, I would imagine, being through this period, and I think quite similar to now. Instead of people being out of work because jobs have shut and businesses have shut down, people were out of work then because they weren't at home and they weren't in the office because they were actually out on battlefields shooting at each other effectively. Really, really scary. And the markets fell accordingly, but a couple of years later they recovered. 25, 30 years later, history repeats itself. We got the Vietnam War, same thing, a 30-odd% drop from the peak to the base. Again, people weren't dying of illnesses. They were dying because humans were shooting humans. This is very, very scary times, but the markets managed to respond later on and return back to normality.
And also, and in these periods of time when we were at war, governments were printing money. They were spending large amounts of money, running deficit budgets to just keep the economy going, not too dissimilar to what's going on at the moment. Everyone was worried about inflation and whatever, but we came out of those periods. And when the markets turned, they turned quite sharply.
They turned quite quickly as well. 1987, I guess, is familiar, 33% in 2 months, but I guess the familiar part is in one day it dropped 22%, which is still the largest drop in any single day that we've seen. Look, there's some technology issues that help this in the background, some automated sell down programs.
Yeah, this was
dysfunction.
Yeah, this was the start of black boxes or algorithms, really.
Yep.
And people haven't thought about what happens if we get into a selling frenzy, essentially. And now we have market measures where, particularly in the US, they will freeze the market if it falls 7% in a day, just to take the heat out and just get some emotion out of the market, because that's what they're fearful of. Is just self-fulfilling prophecies in turmoil. I mean, it took 2 years to turn around, but it did come back.
I mean, and in regards to motion and what we're seeing now with markets plummeting, it really is panic selling. Quite opposite to the panic buying that we're seeing throughout the supermarkets. So this is what people do in these times. And if I can digress a bit, I think some of the stuff that we see in the media helps or fuels that. I mean, certainly in today's age, not only with the newspapers and looking at Channel 7 or Channel 9 on the TV, we've got social media. You've got Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Every minute, every day, someone's posting something. And the news that's posted, certainly around markets, the stuff people tend to follow is the negative news. We've got a great example from a conference that we went to a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, FYG hosted a conference we host a conference every twice a year, but in 2008 for the GFC, we invited one of the well-known financial journalists in Australia. He still presents, won't mention him by name, but he still presents on the ABC regularly.
Not much hair.
Not much hair. No. He was talking about financial journalism and in the times that we were at that time, which was quite anxious. Anyway, to be honest, the presentation and the content was quite depleting and draining. And Peter Mansell, who's one of the directors of FYG, was hosting the day, stepped and said, "Excuse me, Mr. ABC presenter, what is it that goes through? How do you write this stuff? How do you go away deciding what's going in the papers?" And thankfully, to his credit, he was very honest. And he said, as a journalist, whether it's financial or otherwise, we focus on emotions. And one of the most engaging emotions for getting people to do things is fear. Yep. And so most financial journalism, or most journalism, is written with emotive tone. It's the same in social media. Like all the runs that we've had, like the toilet paper thing, that was a crisis, right? Yep. But then we have remember I had the old, for Philip Hughes, to put out the bats, and everyone followed that. It's emotion that drives sentiment. And, I just thought I'd use our local rag, the Cairns Post, not to disparage them, but last week was a reasonably volatile week.
Yeah. Yep.
Last Monday was actually the biggest declining day in the Australian share market in 12 years. The front page of the business section of the Cairns Post last week was worst day ever. Well, in percentage terms, that's not quite right.
We had 22 in 87.
But in points terms, it was a big day. But it was a driving article. I mean, the interesting thing is last Tuesday, a bit like yesterday and today, markets bounced pretty strongly. In fact, last Tuesday was the biggest single gaining day on the Australian market since 1997. Right, it's 20 odd years. Paper on Wednesday, business section, bottom,
think about page 4.
around about there.
Yeah, page
Bottom
4.
left corner, small article, positive story with a negative headline. You know, as if well, it went up, but why? You know, it's only going to sell. And then, of course, as we know, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week were negative days, and the paper on Thursday was back to dollar plummets again.
It actually plummeted by the same amount it went up the day before.
Yes, yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, it's just interesting. I looked at the Cairns Post today to see if I should update this, and as I said yesterday, was one of the bigger days. I mean, the Dow was down.
Dow was up. The biggest it's been since 1933.
Biggest movement on there. That's a small index, but it's still a massive day.
Massive jump.
Not a single article on the market, journalistic article on the market in the Cairns Post today.
Yeah.
Just the standard graph that's there. And so, you know, we just got to try as hard. There's a lot of noise out there. We've just got to, particularly when you're investing, you just got to sift through and only action what's required. And that's when your circumstances change, not because the markets went crazy.
Yep. We've got a couple more slides, a bit more recent of a couple of market crashes. We go back to 2000, the .com bubble burst, the www. Whatever era. We had Google was sort of founded around here, Amazon, eBay around this time, still quite big companies now, but there are also thousands and thousands, literally thousands of companies worldwide set up by tech gurus sitting in their basement with a laptop, setting up websites, venture capitalists throwing money left, right and centre, driving the share prices through the roof.
Absolutely.
I mean, tech was the way to go. There was the world was changing. It was get on board.
If you weren't in e-commerce, you weren't going to survive in business. Retail was dead.
Yeah.
Fund management companies were making tech-only funds because that was the way of the future.
Yeah.
And it was until it wasn't.
Until these companies had to get valued at some stage. Didn't show a lot of profit. Actually showed none. A lot of them.
Most of them showed losses.
Most of them showed losses. Investors obviously realised this and started selling out, and that started the downfall. But interesting, through this period, we also had SARS, a health epidemic, which at the time was huge.
It was massive.
I mean, the mortality rate was nuts.
It was easy.
And it was scary. I mean, it didn't end up getting to our shores, but at the time you thought it might.
Yeah, there was 8,098 people in the world infected with it. 774 of them died. So the mortality rate was about 10%, or just under. But in the US, there was only 8 cases and no one died. In the concentrated places, concentrated countries, the death rate was closer to 15%. But thankfully, it didn't spread like we expected. But that wasn't the end of it.
No, and then we had, 2 planes fly through the World Trade Center. In a second, America stopped. I think the world stopped. I think a lot of us were thinking, are we going back to war again? We shut up shop and going back to war. This was scary, scary, scary times.
And a 24-hour news cycle. I remember sitting there, all we did was watch CNN, and it was
it was scary. And when we're in the middle of it, it was like, wow, how do we pull through this? How does the world pull through this? But as you can see, the markets fell, and they fell plenty, but it recovered. It took a little bit longer, but it recovered.
And it bounced and then fell again. So it was very hard in any of these times. With hindsight, things are obvious, but through the period, it's not so. And then the more recent one.
Yeah, 12 years ago, we can all remember the global financial crisis. Basically the financial system, the banking system in the US broke.
Started to fail all around the world.
Failed. The government stepped in and propped it up to a point. But again, it was a time where we thought, a lot of people were saying capitalism is gone. The markets plummeted 57%.
We were worried. Banks were not lending anything. We were worried if they were going to survive. The government was securing them. Maybe in Australia, we were relatively strong, but the markets they sell 57%. Now, we haven't seen that magnitude of fall yet. That's not to say we won't. And this has been a little bit quicker. Forgetting the last 2 days of up movement, but to Monday, in the 24 days since the 20th of February, the Australian banks had fallen the equivalent in percentage terms to what they fell in the first 3 months of the global financial crisis in price, when the institutions around the world were melting down, right? We have a health crisis. It's massively concerning, and we need to do everything we can to manage it. But at the end of the day, there's been a massive reaction in markets on this.
Yeah, and the markets are reacting every day based on an announcement. And the other interesting thing with the GFC, if you could pick the base, the bottom, the markets actually jumped 53% in the following 6 months of the bottom, and most of that was done in a handful of days. And on top of that, and probably something that gets forgotten because the GFC was so big, we had the swine flu through this period. The swine flu, if you try and compare it today, not that today's finished, but 24% of people globally, worldwide, were affected with the swine flu. 280,000 plus deaths globally, worldwide, 12,500 in the States.
Yeah.
It was big, and it was scary.
And the mortality rate was not as high as it appears to be this time. It was 0.1% rather than 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
But 50% of the population under the age of 20 was infected with the swine flu.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But still, as Paul said, 12,500 people died in the States. Right. That's not to say that, this won't be worse. It's terrible, and it's spreading quicker. And governments are taking much swifter action than they took back then to try and control that. It's part of the nervousness. Is they've said this is as virulent as that. It's a bit more deadly. We don't want it to spread, and we're taking all these other actions. But markets are just going nuts.
But we recovered, and look, I mean, history's littered with these market crashes. We've only picked out a few today, just to try and put a little bit of perspective and ease a little bit of nervousness. I'm sure everyone's got at the moment. The government initiatives, we'll touch base on that.
Yeah, I just want to touch on those quickly. Some of these were announced earlier or increased on Sunday. They all went through Parliament on Monday before Parliament was shut. I'm not going to focus on the business ones per se. I'm just going to touch a few of the personal ones for people on any form of government benefit. Deeming rates have been slashed, so if you're under the incomes test, your benefit's gone up. The government has announced halving of minimum rates for people in pension drawdown, so the same in the GFC. So we have clients that are drawing minimum, but because of their age, they're forced to take more than they need. Well, the government's halved that, so in your circumstance, if that is you, we can cut it back, because a penny saved now is a penny gained down the track. Yep. The $750, if you get any form of government benefit, you will get that. If you have a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, you will get it, irrespective of whether you get an income benefit. Centrelink just need to have your bank account on record to pay it, and that's getting paid on the 31st of March and again in July. Banks freezing mortgage payments for 3 to 6 months, or going to interest only as a minimum if you've got any financial hardship. All that stuff is helping.
Well, you've got to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. You've just got to ask, and they're getting that. In fact, I was just talking to one of the business bankers at the CBA. They've taken the initiative that every business that has loans under 5 million, they're just doing it. Not even asking, they're implementing. So banks are taking positive action through this period. The other one is that's probably the big one, is the access to super.
Mm-hmm.
This is certainly available for people who really need it. If you've been made redundant, if your hours have dropped by 20% or more, or if you're a sole trader and your income's gone down by 20% or more, you have free access, tax-free, to $10,000 out of super before June, and another $10,000 after. This is the avenue that we're saying to people, if you absolutely need it, by all means use it, but taking money out at the moment is not great. Our clients will, in most cases, have fixed interest assets we could fund it from, same as we would for pension drawdown clients. But there's about a 5 to 10 times, depending on age, a 5 to 10 times multiplier here at retirement. So if you took $10,000 or $20,000 out now, that's potentially $50,000 to $100,000 down the track. I mean, it's massive. So we can certainly help. We're here to help with any of that. That's really our job, is to work through that. And so please be in contact if we can be of assistance.
Look, we've touched base, I think, enough on the markets, and certainly feel free to contact us post this if there's anything in particular you want to talk about your portfolios. But I think essentially the markets, we can't control what they're doing. What we think is important is try and just concentrate on what we can control. And right now, it's important to concentrate on our health and the health of our loved ones. Do what the government's saying in regards to the distancing, but it's not only the flu and the flu symptoms we should be wary of. I think, the mental anxiety out there, people are out of work, businesses are shutting down, the mental well-being of people in our community, we just need to be aware of that. Look after each other. We sent some information out yesterday via an email and a blog.
Yeah, which had some great tips from an article I'd come across that had some great tips from mental health professionals about both for our own people or people we know to get through this. This is nervous times.
Yep.
But I think that a final slide from Carl Richards wraps this up really well.
Yep.
There's things that matters and there's things that we can control, and we can only all focus on the intersection of those two. For us, we can help with your management of your money, and if your circumstances have changed, be in touch and we'll tell you if we need to make changes. But personally, just for whatever we can do, let's try and block out the things that are outside our control and focus on.
Block out the noise, as we spoke about.
Absolutely.
Right, so that wraps it up. Thank you for joining it. If you've got any feedback for us, we'd more than welcome it. We've got some good questions from previous events, so we're going to probably put a couple of videos around that will get out. But if, yeah, we're more than welcome to answer any other questions that you may have post this as well. So we're here. Where office is situated enough that we can do the social distancing at the moment in the office until we have to go home or told to go home. But we're here the whole time.
And even when we do go home, the office phones will always be answered.
Yep.
Email is there. Response times might be a bit slower as we're dealing with it, but we'll always get back to you, and please reach out. And we've got the ability to do any meetings that we need to do face to face, where you will actually, we will see you as well on the other side. We can do that one-on-one. So please be in contact. Thank you. We'd love your feedback.
Thank you and goodbye.